What do zombies, Motaba, and a guzzling wasteland have in common? They're just like COVID-19.
Join us for Apocalypse Now as we review some of the best and worst pandemic, post-apocalyptic, and general end-of-the-world films and relate them to today's current predicament.
Give us a listen. We might just save your life. And then share it with a friend. Or don't. Whatever. It's not the end of the world.
Join Scott.
And Callum.
And Des every Friday for a new episode of Apocalypse Now.
Because you never know.
Hello? 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 If you can hear this, it's not too late. I returned to warn you. This is Time Pop, a podcast that discusses time travel and pop culture. There are spoilers. I've seen the future, and nothing is sacred to these folks. Your past, present, and future are sure to be ruined. Even if you could go back in time, as I have, you will never forget what you are about to hear. You've been warned. This is Time Pop.
Darn it, I wasn't recording, but Zoom is always listening. All right, let's do this.
Yeah.
Welcome, Chrononauts, as we guide you through the experience of time travel using pop culture as our tachyons. We will be your constants. I am Des.
And I'm Ari.
And this is Time Pop.
Time Pop.
I always try to stretch it out, and then I always think you're gonna jump in, and then
I missed it.
That time I think I screamed you out. I think I was so loud. Zoom was just like, all right, just mute everyone else on the call.
I missed the train.
We watched Fringe. Did we watch?
Yay!
Did we watch the entire series of Fringe, Ari, or just one particular episode?
This time, just one very specific episode.
Season 2, episode 18, entitled White Tulip, originally released April 15th, 2010, at a hot 44 minutes. I didn't have real commercials in mind. Did you?
No.
Yeah, I of course I could see where the breaks were, and I kept expecting one to show up, but yeah, but I think it even warned me, like, with commercials, and nope.
There weren't any?
None.
That's good.
Starring all the wonderful people you know from Fringe. And this one guest star. Does Peter Weller show up in any other Fringe episodes, or is he just this guy for this episode? He's the time travel guy.
I think it's just this episode, but the character name sounded really familiar to me. So I don't know if he makes another appearance, or I just remember the name so well because this is the best show ever made in history of TV shows.
I think too, J.J. Abrams is big at picking names that matter to us. And so Alistair might just be stuck in your head because of some other sci-fi science thing.
It also rolls off the tongue well. Alistair Peck.
It does. I want to make sure I get this right. I am just going to jump off the rails right now. I am listening to an amazing, this isn't a plug, but if you want it, this is where you got to go, Audible original called The Science of Sci-Fi.
Okay.
And it's really cool. It's a bunch of, there's obviously, I think it's a group of lectures, but they read well if they are. Like it reads like it's a short book. It's 4 hours long. But yeah, they go into some really deep science and then explain it to you through science fiction, through Star Trek and Star Wars. And what are some of the other odd ones? They've already mentioned a couple of interesting offshoots, but I'm only like a third of the way into it, but I'm really, really enjoying it. If there's a way for you to pick it up, I think you would too.
Is that like a podcast? I thought Audible was for like books.
It is, but they have something now called Audible Originals, and they're usually a little bit shorter because they're giving them away for free every month. And so I stumbled across that, and it's fascinating. I recommend it to anyone out there who enjoys science and science fiction. I think there's some people out there that don't want it to get too real because then it gets scary. But
yeah, no, that's right up my alley.
yes. And Oh, the only other two people I want to mention, I don't even write down their real names, is Octavia and John Murphy from the 100, baby. They played,
In the episode?
yeah, they played the homeless guy at the beginning and the waitress who gives him the credit card receipt.
Huh.
Those are two kids that show up in the 100 lately, which is back, but I don't have Hulu Live anymore, so I got to wait until it comes back around on the DVR. And then we're going to catch up on that show, which I keep thinking might go time travel. Like, that show has twisted and turned its way so many different times through its, in a good way, not in a like, what the fuck are we doing, but in a like, hey, this season we're going to do something really new and cool.
Yeah.
And I think they might be leaning towards a little bit of time travel.
Cool.
Tell us about Fringe, Ari. Let's not get into this episode yet. Let's just talk about Fringe. Tell me about Fringe.
So it was really funny because, you start the episode and they start off with the recently on and they give you a little recap of what's happening. And I was sitting there going, oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. And, I was remembering all the things. And I was surprised that season 2, episode 18 had already revealed some pretty major stuff with the show. And I guess it makes sense because there's only 5 seasons. But Fringe is about, if you don't know anything about Fringe, I highly recommend it. If you like science fiction, Fringe is about some FBI agents who bring a very smart scientist man who went insane and went into an insane asylum. They bring him out of his insane asylum so that he could help them solve different, strange, mysterious cases. And these cases have to do with like genetics and the paranormal and time travel and crazy alien things and all weird things science. And it's just a great show. They do a good job with the relationship between the characters. The acting is amazing. The stories are amazing. One major part of the show is the main guy, the old guy who went insane. He has a son, and spoiler alert, but the old guy is a scientist, and his son died when he was very young, when the son was young, and he figured out how to cross into a parallel universe, or the parallel universe, and he did, and he stole his son from another parallel universe and brought him back. Des is making a face.
Holy shnikes.
What do you mean, holy shnikes? That's what did you not see the previously on for this episode?
I did, but I thought it was time travel.
No. This is the only time travel episode from what I remember. The Fringe show is all about parallel universes.
Oh, really? They go into that a lot?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a major part of the show. So the Dr. Bishop is his name, the main guy, and he invented a doorway to cross over to a parallel universe, and he stole his son from that universe because his son didn't die. His son, it was like a weird genetic disease that he didn't die. So he stole him and brought him back. And that has always kind of plagued his mind. And he always felt really guilty. And that was part of the reason why he, later in life, went insane and had to go into an insane asylum. So this episode starts off by recapping that and kind of says, hey, he knows, the main woman, Olivia of the show, she knows, but the son does not know. And the guilt is eating away at Dr. Bishop, the main scientist guy. And there's a really great scene in this episode where he's talking to essentially the guy who time traveled in this episode, talking to him about, don't do what you're trying to do. You're going to regret it and it's going to eat away at you. And I'll go into that more when we do the overview, but that's essentially the main things you need to know about Fringe leading up to this episode.
Awesome. Because, yeah, I was confused because I thought they were time traveling, like I said, which if you search Fringe time travel, this is the only episode that shows up. So I was really, it was strange to me that, they're obviously talking about this, but it doesn't show up in any of the searches. And then it's eating away at him. And then you're just like, well, he saved his son. Like, how could that not be a good thing? But then he also talks to the time travel guy about all of the things that are going to occur because of time travel. Like, if you save your loved one, you're going to screw up a bunch of other stuff. I'm like, well, you saved your son, but it didn't screw up a bunch of stuff. So, okay, parallel universes,
So,
all of my concerns are taken away from that.
so Des, you have not watched this show?
I have not. I had severe, I can't remember if they crossed over for a year or if it was right after. I had severe Lost fatigue when this show came out. And this is back in the day where to watch a show, you had to be there on Wednesday night
Yeah.
with your friends or not. And, I was obviously very interested in this show, but after dedicating Lost is the reason I have a podcast right now.
Really?
Because the reason I know about podcasts is I couldn't consume enough Lost, and I went searching and I heard about this thing called podcasts.
Wow.
And so
Back in the day.
so I listened to Lost podcast, and that spurred my enjoyment of podcasts.
That's so funny. I have never seen a single episode of Lost.
Well, we're gonna tit for tat now.
Is there a time travel episode in Lost?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
The only thing I need to do is figure out which one does it best. I will not make you watch more than 2, but it might take 2 episodes, because I think there's a time travel heavy episode where they're just jumping around a lot. And then there's a lot of episodes that have it in it, but I think there's one in particular where they jump around a lot and one in particular where they kind of explain what's going on. So I think.
Well, all right, I'm down.
Awesome. And I'm into Fringe now because knowing that I because I just haven't wanted to do it, because I'm like, again, this is going to be my life. Like if I start Fringe, that's what I'm doing for the next month.
Well, there's only 5 seasons.
Well, and they watch really well. I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of this episode without ever watching anything else. So, I won't watch it as closely as I did Lost, but I can throw it on now and watch previously on Fringe and kind of catch up and just enjoy these great characters.
Yeah.
So tell us about this episode of Fringe, Ari.
Yeah, okay. So this episode starts out, and I watched this last night, and of course, I didn't take notes.
Yeah.
So if you remember something I didn't, chime in. So this episode starts out on a train.
And by the way, it's playing in the background, and it should take us about as long to talk about it as the episode is. So it should work out very well. So they're on the train.
Yeah, so there's a train, there's people on the train, and then lights start to flash and flicker on the train, and all of a sudden a man appears in the in the walkway of the train, and the train stops, the man gets off, there's a kid, a teenager that's getting
his name is John Murphy, Ari.
Not everybody has seen the 100, Desmond.
They should. It's a little teeny.
Okay, he's the like bad kid in the 100.
Oh, I love John Murphy. He's
okay. So he gets on the train. He has a brief interaction with the man that appeared and asks him for money or something. So the kid gets on the train, and he slowly notices that all the passengers on the train are dead. Then it cuts to Dr. Bishop, the main scientist guy that went insane. He's an older gentleman. He's writing a letter to his son, and based on the previously on for this episode, you can tell that it's kind of a tell-all letter. He wants to tell his son what he did and who he is and where he's from, and he puts it in a letter. So Dr. Bishop, Olivia, who is the main FBI woman, main character of the show, and I'm blanking on his name.
Peter,
the son, Peter, yes. The scientist guy's son is named Peter. So they're on the scene, they're investigating. They discover that the lights on the train are out. Everybody's cell phone on the train is dead, as if it got drained. They bring a couple of bodies back to their lab, and they discover that all the mitochondria have been just drained, which is essentially the battery of each of your cell in your body has just been drained.
And quickly too, like usually when you die, everything slowly dies, but it's obvious that these people just turned off like the lights in their cell phones.
Right. So through security footage, they find who this guy is. His name is Alistair Peck, and they go to his apartment, and he's not there, but they discover chalkboards and papers full of equations and numbers and science things. And of course, Dr. Bishop, who is a genius, kind of recognizes it a little bit and says, he's dealing with, what did you say in the beginning? Tachyon particles?
Yeah, he says I can understand some of this, and he mentions, he says there he's talking about tachyons. Do you want to hear about tachyons, Ari?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see if I remember what they are.
If we're gonna do a time travel podcast, we got to do this. A tachyon is a hypothetical particle that always travels faster than light. Most physicists believe that faster than light particles cannot blah blah blah. Okay, I thought I was going to go in more, but anyways, it's a theoretical faster than light particle.
Is it theoretical? Because I thought that they built, and I could be thinking of something. I might be thinking of a quark, but they built some machine underground that can measure them.
They were measuring that's the hadron boson or boson hadron collider. Yeah.
Is that what it is? Is that for measuring something else?
That's for smashing atoms together. And
oh no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of something else. No, not the collider. It was in the Cosmo show. Anyway, not important. So it is just theoretical. It's not a real thing.
According to Wikipedia. So
okay.
Take that with a grain of tachyon.
Okay. So then.
Oh, sorry. Any hypothetical particle. So a tachyon isn't a specific particle. If there is a particle, so there could be tachyons. So in this infinite universe of ours that we haven't fully discovered yet, anything traveling faster than the speed of light would be considered a tachyon. Sorry.
Got it. Okay. No, yeah. So they're still looking through his apartment, and Alistair shows up. Right? This is where he shows up and walks in, and he's like, "What are you doing to my apartment?" And they all have guns drawn on him because he essentially murdered like 10 or 12 people or something. And with guns pointing at him, he all of a sudden starts to like vibrate and blur and shake, and he then disappears, and the same day starts over.
Before he goes away, I have him written down as his first name. So Walter, you keep calling him Dr. something.
Dr. Bishop, Walter Bishop.
So Walter Bishop notices that he's got some mesh around him. And
right. So you notice like on his forearms that there's metal and wires embedded in his skin. And is that where he says, "Oh, you're using like a something cage?"
Faraday mesh.
He's using Faraday cage? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because yeah, okay, we'll get that into that later.
So that's what keeps it. Oh, we're gonna get into it now because this is where we're at. So a Faraday cage keeps it on him. Without the cage, obviously when he lands, he emits a lot of energy that's killing people. But when he travels through time, I think that mesh keeps it internalized to him and doesn't like have the surrounding area travel with him. I think that's the meaning of it.
Right. So a Faraday cage is metal that is a conductor that allows electricity or energy to travel through it without harming what is inside of it.
Yes.
So he essentially embedded a Faraday cage, wires and plates inside of his skin. So, I mean, let me just say right now, there are a lot of holes with this episode, like a lot. So many that I like started getting excited. I was like, ooh, we can talk about that and we can talk about this. Like, there's a lot of things. So first and foremost, the cage he built within his skin would never realistically be able to work. So
tell me why realistically. I can imagine why it wouldn't work, but you've obviously thought this through.
Yeah. So the little that I do know about Faraday cages is, it's a conductor of energy or electricity through the metal, and the metal itself, it gets hot. It's a conductor, and if anything is touching that metal, it's going to be affected by the energy or the light or whatever it is. So the fact that he had this in his skin, and he only had it like on his torso and his arms and his legs. He did not have it around his hands or around his head.
True.
Okay. So that right there is an issue. So
I think it's so.
Are you looking it up?
Yeah. Because I think a Faraday cage is also something that protects. Again, like I said, I think for him it was more built as a way to insulate the energy within him. A Faraday cage or Faraday shield is an enclosure used to block electromagnetic fields. So I think he was using it more to block the magnetic fields, to keep them internalized with him, to allow all of that energy to be exerted on his body and not the surrounding area. So I think the amount of energy or the amount of electricity that's going through it is kind of, I think the implants, I think the cogs he was putting under his skin were the time travel device, and the cage was just there to keep all that energy focused on him and not going out.
Well, you're talking about like the metal plates that he was like sanding down.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, they never tell you or really show you what the time travel machine is. You just see wires and metal plates that he's like, filing down to a certain size, and then he puts it in under his skin, which would create so much chance for infection and bacteria, by the way.
Oh. Yeah, that was the most gnarly thing I've ever seen, was this television series self-mutilation shot.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, again, there is another reason why this is unrealistic, because to put that much metal and wires just below your skin would be so unhealthy and cause so much infection and
I know, wouldn't his wife be so turned on if he went back and got naked?
And be so uncomfortable and painful. So he's surrounded by all these cops with guns on him, and he does his little, all of a sudden, just like, no, what, Desmond?
Sorry, I'm reading more on Faraday cages. A Faraday cage operates because an external electrical field causes the electric charge within the cage's conducting material to be disturbed, so that they cancel the field's effect in the cage's interior. So it's also protecting him. Like, I was thinking that the cage was there to keep the energy in him, but I think the cage is actually there to keep the energy from being exerted on him to the point of killing him.
Right. Whatever, in this show, it seems like the cage is what is either moving him through space-time, or protecting him as he moves through space-time. But again, he did not have any of those wires around his hands, his feet, or his head or neck.
Yeah.
So, hole right there.
There we go. Big hole in his head. I'll buy that.
Yeah. So he reappears on that same train on that same day. He has another interaction with the kid guy from the 100, and this time he says something different to the kid. He says, "Sorry, you have to go through this again." And then the day repeats with Walter Bishop writing the letter to his son Peter, them showing up on the crime scene, but this time the kid tells the police officers what he said to him, and that makes Olivia and Walter and Peter kind of suspicious. They still bring bodies back to their lab, and then somehow, they go to Alistair Peck's apartment, and everything has been cleaned out. There's nothing there. And then I'm trying to remember how they find him again.
The cell phone. The cell phone. Yeah.
They do a little bit of digging on Alistair Peck, and they realize that he used to work for MIT, and he used to be engaged, and his fiance was killed in a car accident about 10 months earlier to this date. And they notice that her cell phone is still active and someone is paying for her cell phone, and they find him somehow through the cell phone, right?
They figure out what cell tower that phone is most likely has been pinging off the most, and then through that smaller area they find a place that he rents.
Right.
And this is when one of them gets a deja vu and says deja, and then someone says, "Wow, I'm getting a deja vu," and he says, "Deja vu is fate's way of telling you you're on the right path."
Right. So they're going through Alistair's apartment, and Olivia, the main character of the show, says, "Whoa, I'm getting deja vu." Walter says it means you're on the right path, and then the son Peter says, "That's funny. I've literally never ever experienced deja vu." And there's that moment where Olivia and Walter Bishop, the older scientist guy, kind of have a moment and look at each other.
And Peter says, I guess I'm not on the right path.
Yeah, because he's from an alternate universe.
Ooh, yeah.
So
They find some more writings from him, from the time traveler, and one of them said, the last entry says achieving the Ariete principle.
oh yeah, Arlette.
Arlette,
So his
sorry.
fiance's name was Arlette, and they figure out that he's time traveling. They figure out that he's trying to go back to save her. They figure out that this jump that he did on the train, there's even a moment where Walter Bishop explains time travel, right? They do the classic on a piece of paper. He writes the number 10, he writes a line, and then a number 11. And he says, the theory of relativity or something Einstein said that if you had enough energy, you could bend time, but it would require a lot of energy at the point of entry, which I thought was interesting.
I thought he said eggs. Oh, entry, right.
Sorry, exit. No, you're right.
Yeah,
Exit.
at the point of exit.
Sorry, which I thought was interesting because I thought it would require more energy to start the bend than it would be to end the bend. But so they said that the point of exit, whenever you land in the past or the future, sucks up a lot of energy to power the travel.
Because that's supposing that when you time travel, you don't move, you're pulling the past towards you.
So,
which would make sense that more energy would be exerted on the exit because that's what's being manipulated. You're pretty much staying in place where you're.
Yeah, but he doesn't stay in place. He travels not only through time, but also through space, because he was in his apartment and then he travels back to being on the train. He was in his lab and then travels back to being in the center of that field. So if what you're talking about, actually happened, he would have been in the same place, bended time around him, and ended up in the exact same place. But that's not what he did.
Correct. I'm just thinking of even if you're pulling that space and time towards you, the point of exit is going to be where all the energy is exerted because that's the actual place it's being manipulated.
Yeah, I mean, you it could be, but it also could be the fact that to start to bend space-time would require a lot of energy.
It would, but that energy I think is being more exerted on what you're bending towards you. And I think by because I would think that, yeah, the exact same amount of energy, I would think that it'd be split in half. However much energy it takes to time travel, half of that energy is expended on entrance and half of that energy is expended on exit. But this.
Right. So, but in this story, apparently all the energy is being sucked up around him on the point of exit when he travels to the past.
Right.
So they figure out that, okay, he's been jumping 12 hours into the past onto this train. He's been jumping 12 hours. They figure out, okay, he's trying to save his fiance. And they say, in order for him to do that, he has to jump 10 months in the past. That's going to require even more amount of energy. And he's going to kill so many people by doing this. And they discover that he has a lab in MIT, in the basement of MIT, and they go to this lab and they find him. And it's surrounded by SWAT. They're ready to just charge in and kill him. And Walter Bishop says, let me talk to him. I want to talk to him. So he goes in, he kind of sneaks up on him. He's unarmed. He says, don't jump. I want to talk to you. And he essentially Walter Bishop had figured out the missing part of the equation that would help Alistair Peck jump back for 10 months, jump back 10 months, because he figured out that Alistair Peck wasn't able to jump further back than 12 hours, but Walter figured out how to do that. And he meets him in his lab and he says, this is what you're missing. Here is the answer. And now you can jump, but I'm going to implore you that you should not jump. And this is why. And he tells Alistair Peck what he did, that he built a doorway between universes, crossed over, stole a son that wasn't his, and brought him back. And he said that it has haunted him his entire life. It drove him insane. And he then starts talking about, wanting forgiveness. And he starts talking about God. And Alistair Peck was like, you're a man of science. There, essentially there is no God. And he was saying science is God. And I forget what he said, but it was such a great moment of this episode. I love what he said.
Yeah, it was poetry.
Yeah. He basically said, he gave some examples and he says that's science, which is God. And it was beautiful. And I almost want to look it up to figure out what he said. But, Walter kind of kept on saying, well, I want forgiveness from God. I need a sign, and I asked him to give me a sign to show me a single white tulip. And Alistair Peck was like, white tulips don't grow here, especially this time of year, and Walter Bishop is like, it's God. He should be able to do that. If God can forgive me for what I've done, I feel like my son could forgive me for what I've done, and I could essentially tell him what I've done. And at this point, Walter had like unplugged his microphone because you've got the SWAT team and everybody's listening. But before he talks about, stealing his son, he had unplugged his microphone. And so the SWAT outside is getting nervous and they start to like charge in. And as they're charging in, I guess Alistair Peck had already implemented the changes in the equation because then he starts to... No? Is that what happened?
No, he go from there, then he jumps 12 hours back.
He does another train jump.
And then he immediately starts working on the new calculations.
Okay, so then he jumps back 12 hours again onto the train, killing those people again, having all the same things happen, and then is back in his lab. They show up to his lab again, and they start to like close in on him. There's like a firefight, or not a fight, but they're like shooting and charging in.
I don't even think they start shooting because I think he's hiding. He's starting to start his time travel from behind a wall, and they're just starting to kick the door in.
Yeah, they're kicking the door in. So you see that he's like trying to write a letter. He's trying to write something, and he jumps. He does his little flicker jump thing.
Real quick, we're going to get nerdy here for a second. And I'm almost up on the God quote. When that shows up, I'll repeat it. But
okay,
this is what makes time travel possible. You are trying to appropriate the curvature of time using a 7-order polynomial. It needs to be 9. Do you?
So that's what he says in the episode.
Yes. Do you want to hear what a polynomial is?
Yes.
This is going to melt your brain. Well, maybe it won't. Maybe you know more math than I do, but this is Greek. In mathematics, the degree of polynomial is the highest of the degrees of the polynomials monomials with non-zero coefficients. The degree of a term is the sum of the exponents of the variables that appear in it, and thus is a non-negative integer.
Ha! That's so perfect for a science fiction show, right? Like nobody's going to understand that. So let's just use it because it's science mumbo jumbo, even though it's probably a real thing. That's great.
It's a real thing that nobody understands.
I love though that he says that instead of 7, it's 9. There's a quote, and it might be from Tesla, it might not be, but it's something along the lines of, if you can understand 3, 6, and 9, you will understand the universe.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's Tesla. I could be wrong, but 3, 6, and 9 appear so many different places in physics, in science in general. So I love that he says instead of 7, it's 9. That's really cool. I love it, but I don't understand it very much at all. So he wrote a letter, and then he gets closed in, and he jumps away, and he tells Walter, before the final or the second to last jump, he tells Walter, he's like, I'm not going to hurt anybody. He's like, the day that my fiance was killed, we got into an argument. She went to go shopping, and I found myself in a field looking at a hot air balloon. And that's where I was when she got into her car accident. And so he's like, I'm going to jump back to that field because there was nobody around. And then I'll be able to get to her and save her. So that's what he does. He jumps back to a field. And as he kind of arrives, you see a big circle of the grass in a big circle, like turns brown, it dies essentially. And then he starts running towards the city, and he runs and catches up to his fiance, gets in her car, and then a truck hits the car. A big truck smashes into the car that they're both in. And you notice that, what Walter said to him got to him, and the last thing he said, he was like, I can't just leave her there like that. And so he traveled back in time and he sacrificed himself to be with her. Yeah, yes, love. It's all for love. It's why we do things in this crazy universe. So after the car accident, you see there was a woman that works at MIT that they interviewed in order to find Alistair Peck's location. And she said, yeah, he worked here for a year and then he disappeared. And here's some like thesi. There's some
Yes.
papers that he
Yeah.
wrote.
They're just collecting dust here.
Yeah, and through reading all those papers is how Walter Bishop figured out the missing piece of his equation. So we after the crash, we jump back to this woman and she goes into a filing cabinet and she pulls out a letter, and the letter said, please don't mail until May 18th or whatever the date is currently. And
10 months after May 18th, most likely.
oh, right. That's when she died, May 18th. So it was a very specific date. So Alistair Peck had left this letter in her office and basically said, don't mail this to a specific date. And it was a letter to Walter Bishop. So after the crash, the day starts over, and it's the day where Walter Bishop is writing the letter to his son. And instead of them getting called to this crime scene, the son comes over and delivers a record player that he fixed for Walter. And then Walter checks his mail and there's a letter, and he opens the letter and he pulls out a single piece of paper, and on it is drawn a tulip, the outline of a tulip on a white piece of paper. And it's just such a beautiful moment, and he just kind of like looks around and smiles slightly. And it was such a great end to the episode.
God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. And so in Walter's mind, it's kind of God, but it's not. It's a man who traveled through space and time and sent him a letter from the past. It's all science and science fiction. It's so poetic. I love it.
And so then that convinces Walter to burn the letter to Peter.
That's right. So then he burns the letter to Peter, which is unusual because earlier he said, if God can forgive me, then I know my son can forgive me. Meaning if I told him the truth, he would forgive me. But instead he burns the letter, meaning he's not going to tell his son what happened.
Oh, he got 3 seasons left.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Something's got to fuel it. Oh, yeah, that's so cool too. I didn't quite put it all together at the end that was the exact same moment that he normally gets the phone call to go look at the train, but instead Peter comes home, because they show Peter when he calls Walter to have him come in to take a look at the train, he's working on a record player.
Yeah.
And so in the other stories, they don't get to that because he gets called on the scene and doesn't get the record player fixed that day. But since they're not called off to the train, he finishes the record player and brings it home.
Yeah. So let's talk about laws and holes.
Laws.
And holes. So the laws of this story are, well, with this machine it's what?
Sorry, the biggest law ever. You were maybe going to just say this, but each jump back cleans the slate.
Yes. So that is a law. Yes. Every time you jump back, you can start over. You can jump back to the exact same moment and you just start over and rewrite the future. And I was going to say that the law of this time travel, so the time travel device is a machine embedded into this person's body, and he can trigger it with his mind.
Okay. It's definitely just him thinking stuff. Yeah.
There's no button he pushes. There's no thing he does. He just all of a sudden starts to think it, and he starts to vibrate and jump away.
And he can seemingly go wherever I guess not wherever he wants, because he probably didn't want to keep jumping onto that train, but he was fairly certain he knew exactly where he was going to go on May 18th.
So that's another thing. How does he navigate where he wants to go? There is no screen. There is no actual, numbers that you put in. So essentially for this time travel device, you just think it and then you arrive there. You look like you're about to say something.
Sorry, I was going to let you finish, but I was thinking. I didn't mean to cut you off. It's a problem with Zoom. You can see me thinking out loud.
Yeah. So yeah, the machine itself for me in this story is a major hole. It's just wires and plates embedded in his skin. It doesn't go all the way around his body. And to activate it, you just think, and then you think of where you want to go, and you're there. Another issue I have with this is he reappears on a moving train. Like
Is it definitely still moving when he pops on, or is it right when it stops that he pops on?
it's still moving and it slows down and then stops.
Okay.
So the precision in time and space time is just, so this man came up with an equation. The equation led him to put wires and metal plates in his body, but also just knowing this equation allows him to think of a time and then he travels back there. So for me, the actual time travel device in this story is very holy, but still interesting. Another law of this time travel story is that the energy that is required to bend space time is absorbed into you or into the area that you arrive from the things around it. So people, devices, electronics, plants, whatever energy is around you gets absorbed into you or into your device. That I thought was a kind of an interesting concept.
Are they're absorbed into it? Is that
It's absorbed into something, whether it's the machine, whether it's him, whether it's space time itself. It's absorbed inward.
Oh.
I mean, when he arrives in the field, you do see kind of a blast outward for the dead grass, but they talk many times about it sucked up all the energy. It drained the cell phone batteries. And so that is indicating to me that it's inward.
That's gravity, baby.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So I thought that was an interesting concept. I still don't agree with the fact that it only requires the energy at the point of exit. I personally think it would, like you said, require it on both ends or more so just in the beginning.
I like the idea, though, because I know I've said this. I'm going to say it again. The idea that you're pulling time towards you. So instead of so you have your piece of paper. Ari's looking at my piece of paper.
Yep.
And instead of it folding up like this, you bring the future towards you.
Okay.
And that is why all the energy is exerted on the future, because you're staying still and you're pulling that time towards you instead of meeting in the middle.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, but look at what your hands are doing. If you're at one point, you can't see my hands, but the energy required to start that motion, right? Like things in motion want to stay in motion, things at rest want to stay at rest. So if something is at rest, it requires a lot of energy to initiate the pull.
Yeah. I think I think you're right, but I think they did a good job of explaining it in this universe.
Yeah, and for the story, it's great, right? You are traveling back in time, but the cost of it, right? We always talk about the cost of time travel is that you kill what's around you.
Yeah.
And in the fact, for the story, it just worked better that it happened at the point of exit as opposed to the point of entry.
Did he, when he finally made the big jump back to May 12th, did he disintegrate his past self? Did he land right where he was staring up at the balloon and destroy himself?
That's another hole. Where was the past Peck? Where was he? He supposedly was in that field at that time. And when he jumped back, there was no other him past him.
I don't think it is. I mean, they could have addressed it, but if the amount of energy that he took to jump back 12 hours killed 12 people in basically a train car, then going back 10 months and landing in the exact spot where a single human being is, that person is dust.
Well, that would have been the perfect way to close that paradox.
Yeah.
Is you killed your past self and then, then you go run to your wife and then you get in a car accident with her and then the story's over. But they didn't address that. They didn't address where his past self was. Maybe he was.
It couldn't be though, because if his past self is alive, has to be a loop.
Right.
And the fact that they get back to the present and it didn't happen again means that he had to have been disintegrated on sight.
Right, exactly. Let's say that the past Alistair Peck was still on his way to the field at that time. If he did not get, all the energy sucked out of him when he arrived, he's still alive, and then that loop is going to start and then continue. So yeah, they did not address that at all. And they could have solved it very easily by just showing his dead body standing next to him, and then he runs off to go be with his wife. So that's a huge hole. That's probably the biggest hole about this entire episode.
Now, is that in line with Fringe? Like, do a lot of episodes leave quote unquote holes that for you to figure out? Or this being time travel, did it produce way more?
Not that I remember. I have, back in the day when I was watching this, I wasn't trying to pay attention to the science or the holes of the things. From what I remember, it's a pretty solid show scientifically, give or take. Obviously, time travel is going to be different. Yeah.
It is a single, because this show seems to be very much, there's one timeline. There's multiple universes, but within those universes, there's only one timeline.
Yeah.
So does that mean there's only one of you at any time? Because because he never runs it, even though he keeps going back 12 hours and keeps running back to the same warehouse to keep doing the same equations. He never bumps into himself on those 12-hour jumps.
Right. Yeah, they just pretty much left that whole paradox out of this story. If it is one timeline, if you travel back, you should be encountering your past self.
So there must be, well, like you said, and they just didn't want to get into it. It's a single episode about time travel, and they didn't want to get into the paradoxes. But I think it lends itself to the idea that there's just only ever one of you at any given time in this universe.
Yeah, they make it seem like for this story, you never encounter your past self. Maybe your past self just disappears, disintegrate. I mean, this story was more about love. It's a love story. It's also about, the conversation about God and science.
And it's really about Walter and Peter, like them.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this story is a way for Walter to make peace with his actions and look his son in the eye again.
Yeah, so it's good.
Thank you for listening to Time Pop, brought to you by Sounds Awesome. Please like and subscribe and tell a neighbor or friend about it so you can share a discussion of your own on the topic of this movie. Please check us out on social media. We are at What Sounds Awesome on Facebook and Instagram, and at Sounds Awesome 2 on Twitter. You can email us directly with questions and comments at wesoundawesome@gmail.com. We would love to read your thoughts aloud on air, and definitely let us know about a movie you would like featured on a future episode. We have 3 great movie podcasts. Rotten Popcorn, where Scott and Dez discuss films with vast differences between fans and critics based on Rotten Tomatoes aggregation. And Apocalypse Now, where Scott, Callum, and Dez talk about apocalypse-ish movies about society going through a difficult situation, not unlike the one we are currently living through. Want to check out some non-movie related podcasts? Check out All the Answers. You have questions? The Record Keepers have answers. Cassidy and Katie have sassy comments. Who are the Record Keepers? You'll have to listen to find out. And our newest addition to the Sounds Awesome family, Truth Not Trends. Liam Bauer and Jesse Schmidt have a combined 35 years of strength training, and they are here to keep you strong, fit, and motivated through these difficult times. Please visit our website at whatsoundsawesome.com to find all these fine podcasts, or just search Sounds Awesome in your podcaster of choice to find these fine shows. Please rate and review. And now, back to the exciting conclusion of this episode. So let's just, so you're not using this, right?
No, thank you. Would you use this, Desi?
No.
Why?
Because I have a note sitting here that says, quote unquote, medical insertion of parts. No. Just
Yeah.
huge, just like, oh, like, I mean, in a future where this technology has been perfected and they've worked it out and put it into a suit, maybe.
Yeah, like why couldn't he have built something that he puts on like a backpack or a shirt or a suit? Yeah, the entire thing. It still can be light and flexible and he just puts it on and then goes. But I think, they wanted something different. They wanted a little bit of shock and awe.
They got it. That was
Yeah.
gross. So yeah, trying to think of of one last time travel question to ask, since I can't ask my usual time travel. Would you go back to save a loved one, knowing it might cause all kinds of other problems?
Oh, would I save a loved one knowing that it would kill other people, innocent people?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, kill is probably a likely outcome, but I mean, if that's going to happen, like that, your loved one is at least going to take a job away from someone else or a plane seat. Like it's going to start a domino effect. Like whether, if you follow those dominoes far enough, yes, there's probably going to be a death down the road. But now that your loved one is taking up time and space and energy and jobs and bus seats, it's going to throw everything off. And you don't know maybe it will be a lot of death, but it's definitely going to throw off.
Wait, are you asking that if I travel back, it will kill people, or if I travel back and save that person, it's going to take up jobs? What are you asking?
I'm saying that you don't know for a fact that saving a loved one is going to result in death.
No, but so you're not talking about this, like this specific story?
Well, I think he uses death as the ultimate action of up God's plan. But I don't think that he's saying that it's a 1-to-1 ratio, like this life for that life. But, if you fuck up God's plan, it's easy to extrapolate that some deaths are going to occur that wouldn't have during the first time through. But
who's saying that? Walter?
Yeah. When Walter and him are having the conversation about the dangers of time travel, I know that he says death, but I don't think he knows for sure that going back in time and saving one person's life is going to immediately equal a death of another. I think he's saying that for shock value, that if you fuck with God's plan, there's a good chance that lives are going to be lost.
Okay, first of all, he never says God's plan. I don't know where you're getting that from.
I'm asking my own question right now.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to use this show as my launching pad.
I'm very confused about what you're trying to ask me.
Would you go back in time and save a loved one knowing it's going to fuck up God's plan?
Okay, yes, because there is no such thing as God. So yes.
There you go. I would not.
Okay.
Because like I said, I think it starts a domino effect of things that you can't predict. And again, I'm not talking about instant death. I'm not talking about saving a loved one is going to make someone else die, but it's going to throw off, like in Project Almanac, where going back in time doesn't kill somebody, but it does make the basketball team not go to finals, which allows the father of said son from basketball team to work that night to fly the plane that crashed. That didn't crash because when he was at his son's game, the pilot who did fly that plane didn't crash it.
Okay.
So those are the kind of dominoes I'm talking about for.
Okay. So you think that by saving someone's life, it's going to cause other bad things to happen that shouldn't have, but yet you know that bad things happen all the time in the world.
Not because of me.
But not because of you. So the possible guilt that you would feel with the potential of causing things to happen that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Because you feel that time is set, that everything that is supposed to happen will happen.
Well, it has happened. I don't know that it's supposed to happen. I just know that it has happened. And for me to selfishly decide that it needs to happen another way so that I can have my one person back in my life is too selfish for me.
So you believe the future is supposed to happen a certain way?
It doesn't matter about the future. We're talking about the past. We're talking about the last 10 months have happened a certain way. And for me to go back 10 months and save someone and allow those 10 months to redo themselves differently for my selfish reasons is something I'm not.
Right. Well, it doesn't future or past. You just say time is supposed to, everything is supposed to happen in a specific way, whether it's a higher power or just chance who is controlling it.
So
You think that,
do you think
go ahead.
if you went back 10 months and didn't change anything, that things would happen the exact same way?
If I went back 10 months and didn't change anything, do I think everything would happen the same way? No.
Okay.
Just by being in the past, something has changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not saying I'm saying the word God because they use the word God in the show. I personally don't believe in a predestined God's plan.
Okay.
I do believe that the last 10 months happened, and they happened a very specific way.
Right.
And for me to risk it happening differently for a single human being is selfish.
Interesting. I disagree. I completely disagree. You know, bad things happen all the time. People are killed, things are changed, things burn down. There's no way you would be able to know that by this person still being alive caused all these other things. And even if you could, who's to say that later down the road these people would have died anyway in some weird way?
But you would know.
If you like researched it and followed up on it.
Well,
sure.
if you went back in time 10 months and then either lived those 10 months again or jumped back to the present, you would know exactly what changed.
This reminds me of the ethics question they talk about. There's like a train on a track, and there's, you know, on one track is 2 people and another track is you know, another person. You know, which one do you kill? Do you kill the old lady or do you kill the 10 children, you know? And then they switch it up again. They say, okay, on one track is your favorite person in the world, the person you love the most, but on the other track is 10 people. Where do you let the train go to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever answered that question?
I jump in front of the train.
You jump? Wow. Okay.
I'm not going to stop it, but at least I don't have to live with it anymore.
That is very selfless.
Oh, until next time.
Yeah.
I'm Desmond McNeese.
I'm Ariel Gala, and a very awkward goodbye. Maybe not awkward, tense.
That was beautiful. That was as close to an argument as we've gotten in this podcast. That was gorgeous. That's science for you, though. Your brain, because our brains just start to like absorb this science in a certain way, and then when someone takes you out of your own scientific space, it gets even more confusing.
So you're telling me you wouldn't save Kelly's life basically because there's a risk that random people would die?
It depends on how it happened. If I felt like it was a super random accident, maybe I do. But again, this is me being selfish in deciding what's a random accident and what's see, this is weird because there's so many instances where I would time travel, and that already is changing so much that for me to do it to save a life, you know, what's the difference?
Yeah.
But I feel like there is, and I just feel like humans just occupy so much more space and energy than our frames would make you think, that just, you know, that gravitational pull that wasn't supposed to be here would cause so much change. I'm trying to think if I'd be weirded out if someone came back and was just like, don't go down that street, we're going to go down this street. And then, I don't know, I'm at this point in my life, I'm so comfortable with death. Like, I don't want to die painfully, but I'm comfortable with the cycle of life.
Sorry, keep going.
I'm just wondering if, like I said, I'm trying to put myself on the other end of our time travel experiment and wondering how weirded out I would be if I knew that I was supposed to die and now I'm not, what that would do to me.
Yeah.
That would fuck me up if someone was like, "Oh no, you died."
But we're here to save.
Yeah, and it's been in our world, you've been dead for 5 years, and we just figured out time travel, and now we're gonna save you. I wouldn't be just like, "Oh, cool, thanks. I gotta go to work." Like, that would fuck me up.
Yeah, anybody. For sure.
That was a Sounds Awesome production.